You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Pseudo-Archaeology Podcast, a show that uncovers what's fact, what's fake, and what's fun in the crazy world of pseudo-archaeology. Hello and welcome to the Pseudo-Archaeology Podcast, episode 155. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, and tonight, Dr. Andrew Kinkella meets the Witchdoctor of Belize. You better stay tuned. All right, so here we are, episode 155, man. I'm like a serious podcaster now. And you know what's been happening in serious podcaster life? Well, tragedy. And I'll tell you about my tragedy. I got glasses, man. I had lived 50 years of my life, no glasses. You know what I mean? I didn't know how good I had it. So I got the they're not bifocals, but they're the lenses that, change from far to near and all that kind of good stuff. And I have to say, you guys, I feel they make me kind of dizzy. I don't know. And I kind of squint some. They're getting better. I can still pass the DMV test just barely. But I will say it is like having superhuman vision when I look far. So I'm a little bit farsighted. Again, I can still hang, but it's been an interesting process. It's crazy. But enough about my glasses situation. Let's talk about some of my other situations, some of my past situations, digging way deep. How often do we do this? You know what I mean? Dig back into my history of historical situations. Today, I thought I'd talk about the Witchdoctor of Belize. And this is a story, aspects of this I used to tell my students. Then it's funny, after a while, I just kind of didn't. I think those of us who are have any job where we deal with our own personal experiences, you kind of use them for a while, and then they get supplanted by other ones, and these kind of get thrown by the wayside. And then sometimes they do experience a resurgence. And with last episode, where I was talking about the Duende, and it really made me think about the early days in Belize. Right with it, I was like, oh man, the Witchdoctor, the day I went to go see the Witchdoctor. And this, I'm telling you, man, I'm just being honest. It just feels like one of those things where you're like, did that really happen? Is that's right? I think it's right. I even, as I do, wrote some of this down, not too terribly long after it happened. So I do tend to think my memory is pretty good about this. So here's how this goes down. It's like my second season in Belize, right? My very first season was 1993, and my second season is 96. A couple years where I didn't go down. 96 till this day has been the longest season I ever spent in Belize. It was 4 months from I think it was February, March, April, May. Yeah, till early June or something like that. I remember I had my 24th birthday in Belize that year. But since it was my second year there, and we're working on a big Maya site, right? I'm part of the crew. We work at this site called El Pilar. I knew some of the local people from the time before, and this was a great time for me to solidify some of my friendships and this kind of stuff. And in the last podcast, I talked about my friendship with Teo, and how Teo had so many stories about the Duende, right? Teo was, not only was he one of the Belizean staff who worked on the El Pilar project, he was also the caretaker of the site. There was a little caretaker's house where he would stay up there. And I got to know him more this second year. And he'd talk about this Witchdoctor. And he'd be like, Andruman, right? As I said, they would call me Andrew Man, the Belizean guys. Andrew Man, I have to take you to see the Witchdoctor, right? And I would be like, yeah, Teo, that sounds really interesting. Like when, and he's like, one Saturday, right? So it would be one Saturday, we're going to go. Now, in those days, we had 6 days a week work weeks, you guys. We would work Monday through Friday, and we would work half day Saturdays too. It was the real deal, And we had Sundays off. We kind of had Saturday afternoons and Sundays off, and that was it. And I understand why we did that, because it's like you're only down there for so long and everything costs so much. It's like once you're there, you gotta do the work. Anyway, this was several months into my trip when we were finally able to figure this out. And he's like, we're going to go. It's like, we're going to go on a Saturday. You're going to stay the night at my house, right? He's telling me. And he's like, you bring one bottle of rum. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Why? He's like, oh, you pay the Witchdoctor, right? You bring the Witchdoctor a bottle of rum, and then he'll basically have what amounts to a supernatural journey with you. And I'll get into that later, what I really mean by that. So the weekend comes, and I'm like, okay, I remember I went up to the site. We all did. Teo as well. Worked at the archaeology site for the day. It was like an easy day. And then driving back home, on the way back to where we were staying in San Ignacio, we would pass through the little town of Bullet Tree Falls. Belize, you guys, Belize got like the best place names. Bullet Tree Falls, right? This is small, little, tiny, like picture like a village. That's really what Bullet Tree Falls was like. And Teo and many of the other guys who we worked with lived in Bullet Tree Falls. And so me and Teo and the other workmen got out in Bullet Tree Falls. And the project knew that I was going to spend the night in Bullet Tree with Teo. So I get out and I have like a overnight pack, basically. I do have the bottle of rum. I have like a change of clothes. I remember, because there actually are a photo or two that I have floating around somewhere from this day. My sweet outfit was some really light acid wash jeans, because even by this time, acid wash jeans are totally uncool. But that's what you wear in the jungle. You wear like your crappiest clothes. So I had some sweet acid wash jeans. I had my like boots that I'd always wear, like my work boots. I had a shirt that was what are those? Oh, Hard Rock Cafe. A Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt. And this Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt used to be like the shit. Everyone wanted a Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt. It's like, what? I believe it was Hard Rock Cafe Maui. And I think I'd bought it when I was like, I don't know, like 18 or 17 or something. But it was like really big. I remember it was like an extra large. It was a big extra large. And I'm a tall dude, but I'm skinny. And so I remember like a week or two before I went to Teo's house, I used like a knife and I sliced like the bottom of the shirt and both of the arms shorter. So it was like an extra large shirt, but it was like short. I know I'm really selling myself. So I'm wearing that. And then I have a bandana, my sweet shark bandana. So it's like this white bandana with sharks on it that my girlfriend had made for me. And that I think I still own these, you guys. And they're sort of like good luck charms for me. So that's my sweet outfit that I wore. And so we get off and we go to Teo's house, and we've been working for the day. So the first thing we do is we're going to take a shower. But this is like Teo's house is a very basic, like it's kind of like a hut. I don't really want to say hut because that makes it sound more basic than it was, but a very basic structure made out of like boards and sometimes even like narrow, like very skinny trunks of trees, almost, if that makes sense. Like trunks of trees that are only like an inch thick or, like 2 inches thick, kind of all lined up. But there is some real structure to it. And these are of decent size. Teo and his family would live there. And on the inside, it's just like kind of one big room. And it's a thatch roof, right? A peaked high thatch roof on top. And the structure itself is quite large. So it's one kind of big area, but there's like partitions and stuff. Anyway, we need to take a shower and you go one at a time. And they have like a little tiny shower booth kind of out in the backyard. They have a large area because they're also farming. And it's just this like closed off little tiny little enclosure with a bucket, and you just take a bucket full of water, you like wet yourself with half the bucket, you have soap in there, and you like soap yourself down, and then you rinse yourself up with the rest of the bucket. So I remember taking the bucket shower, and then we had dinner, which was really nice, you know, and Teo's wife was so kind. And again, he had a bunch of kids, you know, you guys like picture like, you know, 8 kids running around or something. It's like 8 kids, and it's Teo and his wife and me, and we have dinner, and it's very typical Belizean dinner of like rice and beans and tortillas and chicken. You know, this is typical fare. And then we got to go to bed, right? And the next morning we're going to get up, we're going to go see the witch doctor. And so it's dark, and when I go in, I'm like, where'd all the kids go? And Teo and his wife had like a partition to themselves, you know, where they would sleep. But all the kids all slept in the house, but they slept in like every nook and cranny there was. There were like multiple hammocks slung around, and there's little like just areas, you know, that they would all just kind of crunch into and fall asleep. And there's one extra hammock sitting there, and so I slept in that. So I sleep in the hammock, and I have a fine sleep. I'm used to this, you guys, by this point. I slept in hammocks a ton of times in Belize. And then we wake up in the morning, get ready. I think we have a little breakfast or something. And then we're going to go off and see the witch doctor. Right. And I go with Teo. And of course, the witch doctor lives on the outskirts of town, on the outskirts of the village. And to double down on that, the outskirts of the village were also right along the river. This is the Mopan River. This is a tributary to the Belize River. In Belize, in western Belize, this area, we're not too terribly far away from the Guatemala border. You know, a couple miles kind of thing. It feels like further, but it's not. The Mopan and the Macal are 2 tributaries that will meet and form the Belize River several miles to the east. But so the witch doctor's house is on the outskirts of town, near the banks of the Mopan River. And you guys, it's on top of an ancient Maya mound. And with that, I'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to the Pseudo Archaeology Podcast, episode 155. And we have been discussing the witch doctor of Belize. And when I last left you, I was at a little house on the top of a Maya mound, because that's what it was. And if you're like, this is feeling a little like Dusk Till Dawn by Quentin Tarantino, and I'm like, yeah, kind of. So let me paint this picture for you. So it's not a totally clean down, pristine, huge Maya pyramid, right? This is what we would call in the Maya world a range structure. And what those are long linear buildings, and they're not super tall. They're maybe like, oh God, let's say like 12 feet tall, but they're long. They're like 12 feet tall, and maybe they're like 75 feet long. And so for the ancient Maya, this would have been a building that was kind of built up on a platform, and it would have had walls and rooms and this kind of thing, right? But low lying like that. So, but the ruins of it are now, it's all covered with, you know, trees and grass and shrubs and stuff. But on the top is the witch doctor's house. And so we kind of scurry up the mountain and we meet the witch doctor of Belize. And this guy, he's, I remember, he's very short, very rotund, bald. He looks very much like the Buddha. Like if the Buddha met you, you know, that's what he looked like. Older guy, just sort of, you know, standing there. We meet him. I think I shake his hand, and then he starts just like taking us around his house. Oh, and I must tell you, there are 4 people ultimately on this journey. There's the witch doctor, there's me, there's Teo, and there's one other of Teo's friends who also worked with us on the archaeology project. We'll just call him Doan, because a lot of times people in the village who are older people or people with more sort of influence, they will call them Doan. Like if I was a influential person, I'd be like Doan Andrew, you know, or this kind of thing. Anyway, so the Doan was the 4th guy. And again, he and Teo were friends. He just brought his friend along, and they were just chilling. So the witch doctor takes me around and he takes me in his house. He has some Maya pottery that he shows me. He speaks mostly Mayan, and I speak mostly English, but we can kind of mishy-mashy it together in Spanish. So I remember doing a lot of like partial Spanish as we talk, and he just kind of talks. He starts to talk a little about the Maya and just a little bit about history. I'm trying to catch it. It's hard. I'm like, I'm not sure. But then he's like, okay, kind of abruptly stops, and he motions that we're going to go down the other side of the Maya mound, outside his house, and like down the other side of the mound. So we get out of his house, we go down the other side, and the corner of the mound has been dug out down to the Maya stone. So actually, we are now at the corner of a very low, but real and ancient Maya pyramid. So it's white, just like you would think, right? The white stone, the white plaster, and it's right at the corner. And not only is the corner, like all the shrubs and trees are removed, and he has a little shade thing like over it. So not only is it all cleaned down, but there's a bunch of like Maya religious iconography in there. And there's also a decent amount of Catholic religious iconography in there. So it's this really interesting mix of like Maya Catholic stuff, right? Like I remember there's an image of the Virgin Mary in there. Oh, and he has a podium too. And there's like this little like wooden podium. And I'm looking at this going like, whoa. And then he motions for me to like sit down. So I sit down, Teo and Don are over to the side, and he like asked me if I've brought the one bottle of rum, and I have. So I give him the rum, and I'm like, okay. And then he takes out a glass, and not one of those low glasses. I mean like a beer glass, like the pint glasses. Takes out a pint glass, and he pours a glass of rum. Like, don't do this at home, glass of rum. And he looks at it, and he kind of like breathes in for a second. He kind of goes, and then he just tilts it up and drinks like the whole thing. And I'm like, whoa, because I've never seen anything like that. That's like super dangerous. And then he looks at me, and he pushes the glass towards me, the empty glass, and he starts pouring. And I'm like, dude, I don't care how much of an anthropology type guy I'm supposed to be. There's no way I'm drinking a glass of rum. That's like crazy. But luckily, he stops at the equivalent of like what they call in Belize, like a 3-finger, right? Like a tree finger, which means if you put your 3 fingers up to the side of the glass, like about that much, it's the equivalent of like, I don't know, a double shot, double and a half, something like that. And I'm like, okay. And I drink this, of course, on like an, vaguely empty stomach at 11 in the morning or whatever it was. So I drink too. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I think that Teo and Don have like a little drink too. Okay. So we've all had our drink. And this is now going to be the start of our supernatural journey. And in anthropological terms, the witch doctor is a shaman, right? And what he can do is he can first control mana. Mana is the sacred impersonal force that kind of surrounds us all. It's very similar. It's like the same thing as the Force in Star Wars. So as a shaman, he can do that. And he can also guide us on this soul journey, is what we would call it in anthropology, or a spiritual journey, or a supernatural journey. And the reason why he drank so much rum is not because he's some crazy alcoholic or, trying to be dangerous. It's because shaman will always do that. They will do something to break with reality, right? It can be something like that, like having too much rum or drugs or some sort of pain or not sleeping. There's always some event to switch into the world of the supernatural, right? And this witch doctor person is going to be our guide through the supernatural, right? That's why you go to him. So that's why you would see a witch doctor or shaman, right? They're going to guide you on this supernatural journey. And hopefully you will learn something about yourself or learn something about your problem or whatever reason it is that you went to go see them, right? People would obviously go see them if they're sick or if they're confused in life and want answers. I more got just a basic tour of the supernatural world. So I've gone through this ritual. I'm now, kind of tipsy, a little toasty. And he motions to us to go out into the jungle. So we do, right? And he starts talking more about the jungle and the Maya as we walk through the jungle. And I'm just going with these guys and we're just out in the jungle. And at one point, somebody produces a joint, right? A marijuana joint. Now, at this time, this is like illegal. And I am not a fan of doing like anything, even the slightest bit illegal in any foreign country. That's a terrible choice. But I figure like I'm with these guys. I'm with the shaman, I'm with the Witchdoctor of Belize. He wants me to do it. I'm like, all right. And I take a few puffs of, the world's most basic Belizean bunk reefer, And so not only have we had alcohol, we've also now had, some marijuana. And so we are very much into this supernatural aspect of things. And I remember as I'm walking, it felt like the jungle was starting to breathe, right? The whole place was sort of out and in, sort of, and you could sort of see the trees go out and come back in, right? And it all works together as it breathes. And the witch doctor tells you about how the jungle works and the ancient Maya, right? So I'm getting it. And it's really fascinating to just sort of go along on the voyage and listen to him talk. And I notice that I'm understanding more what he's saying. And I do notice in myself that if I'm a little drunk or something, I'm much better at speaking Spanish because I think it just relaxes me because I'm always very self-conscious talking in foreign languages. And so I'm relaxed, I'm learning, I'm listening, I'm in the world of the supernatural. I'm listening to the jungle creatures, which seem more precise in a weird way. If that makes sense, the jungle is always loud, but it's now more precise. And then in the middle of this, and I don't know to this day where this came from, you guys, but he produces a guitar. I'll talk about the guitar in just a moment.
What you're hearing is Hardie Fiber Cement Siding living up to its reputation as the siding that helps resist weather damage, no matter what Mother Nature throws its way. James Hardie knows how important a reputation is, especially when you're a home builder. That's why Hardie products withstand the elements better than wood-based siding, with styles to match their strength. Because when home builders work with us, we deliver our best so they can look their best. Protect your reputation with exterior products by James Hardie.
Hello, and welcome back to episode 155 of the Pseudo Archaeology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, and I have been talking about my day with the Witchdoctor of Belize. And getting back to our story, he has just produced a guitar seemingly out of nowhere. And man, I remember this, right? And we all sit on this log. And like when you're deep in the jungle, you're always looking for a decent place to sit, And I do think that we were walking along a trail that he had known or he used a lot or this kind of thing. We had to have been because in the jungle, you can't just go anywhere. The brush is so thick and the foliage and stuff. So we were on some trail. He knew where we were. I didn't. Maybe he had. I swear, it felt like I'm like, did he plant the guitar like underneath the log, or behind the log because he knew? I don't know. But so we get there to this log, and the four of us like sit down, and the witch doctor like busts out the guitar and starts singing. And he just starts like singing some tunes, and they're just sort of, I don't know, like Spanish esque, tunes. They felt older, not classical, but maybe older folk tunes, that kind of thing. And so he plays them and he's singing, and like Teo and Don know the songs and they're all singing along and they're like all having a blast. And I'm like just smiling along like a fool. You know how it is, like when you're like the outsider and you're just trying to like, be friendly. So I'm just smiling along and they're playing. So they play and they play, right? And it's great, right? It's just like 4 drunken stone dudes having some fun playing the guitar while the jungle breathes along in the background. And so he finishes the song and then it's quiet for a second, right? And I'm just sort of taking it in. And then he leans over to me and he thrusts the guitar out in front of me and he goes, play. But this is in Spanish, right? He's like, toca. And I'm like, what? And I guess he'd heard that I could play guitar. Now, I am not, you guys, I am not some freaking amazing guitar player, right? I'm not, but I can get through stuff barely. I can play some chords. I can play some tunes. I can play a couple things just for laughs. I could show off at a party if I really wanted, or, that kind of thing. But I am not some sort of great musician. But he goes, play. And when the Witchdoctor of Belize is telling you to play, you're like, all right. And I remember the song I played. I started to play the bluesy intro to Van Halen's Ice Cream Man, right? I remember this. I go, dooba 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 doo, like, just because I felt comfortable with it. I knew how it went. And then he goes, sing. And I'm like, oh my God, because I don't do this naturally, or usually. And so I start singing. So I'm playing the song and I'm like, sometimes I hear, baby, need some to keep you cool. Right. And I'm doing it and I'm playing the song, right? I'm playing it and I'm singing and it's okay. Right. I'm going through and I'm in my head. You know how this is, like when you're doing something like this, something creative, and you think at any minute, this is just going to fall into a tragedy. But I'm like, this is all right. Like, this might not be good, but this is passable. Like, I am doing this. And I get all the way through the song and I finish. And a couple things happen. First, I think to myself, I'm pretty sure that was good. Now, thinking back, I always wonder if I was having like a Leonardo DiCaprio Wolf of Wall Street moment. And for those of you who've seen it, you know what I mean? The scene where they're driving like the Lamborghini or whatever it was, right? Where they're so high that they think they're driving all perfect and they shoot it as if they drove perfect back home. And then they switched what really happened. And what really happened is they like crashed into everything along the way and they had to like crawl out of their own car because they were just so out of it. So I always wonder, I'm like, did that song actually go okay? Or was it in my mind and I really, really sucked it? But I will say the other thing that happened was the Witchdoctor and the other guys, but especially the Witchdoctor, he was like, yeah, more American music. All of a sudden, like his like English was way better, but it also could have just been that I was still on my soul journey. So after that, I know I played 4 songs total, and Ice Cream Man, I gotta say, my first one, that was the high point, dude. I was scraping the bottom of the barrel after that. I know the second song was Blackbird by the Beatles because I know I could play that. And I think I sung along too. Who knows? But I think I did. And then the third song was either Mother Nature's Son or I've Just Seen a Face, both by the Beatles. I think it was I've Just Seen a Face. I'm pretty sure. Those of you who play an instrument, you know that like there's certain songs you can play or it's just kind of in your back pocket for a while. And then you like forget. And then sometimes they kind of come back, kind of like this story. But I had to think when I was prepping for this, I'm like, what did I play? That's what I spent the most time on, I think. in prepping this whole story, and it probably shows, but I was like, what were the songs? I know I did Ice Cream Man. Then I know I did Blackbird. And then I'm 98% sure it was one of those two. It might have been both of those, but I could swear for my 4 songs, it was 2 Beatles and 2 Van Halens. So I might have also done 316, which is just a Van Halen, like slow solo lullaby piece. There's a small chance I did Lithium by Nirvana, but I don't think so. And the other one that's a big contender is I might have done some slow jam version of Ain't Talking About Love, Van Halen, right? So I know my repertoire for the Witchdoctor was 4 songs. And then I was just freaking out. I just tapped out. And at the end though of the last song, they were like, yay. And I remember the Witchdoctor was like, you can come back anytime. And I felt so good. I was like, I've won over the Witchdoctor of Belize, because before then he was kind of reticent and kind of serious. And then he really like opened up, and it just made me feel really good, you know? And of course, by that time, I've checked out his house. I've done his ritual at the corner of his Maya pyramid that was half Maya, half Spanish. We've like cruised through the jungle. We've drank the rum and smoked the herb. And we've played a guitar. He's told me a bunch of stories about the jungle, the breathing jungle. Man, and then it's time to go home, you know? So we get back to the Witchdoctor's house. I feel like once we got back to his house, I feel like I was fine. Like, I feel like I'd sort of like the experience had all kind of closed itself up kind of all at once. We get back to his house, don't feel any effects of what I've had, you know, and I just feel like myself. So we say goodbye to the Witchdoctor. I go back to Teo's house. Just walk over there. I get my stuff. I say goodbye to Teo and his wife and kids. They were so nice. And then I think I either got some bus or taxi or ride in the back of the truck. I can't remember. Back to San Ignacio, which is not very far. The distance is only, dude, it's like 5 miles or something. It feels much further because back then it was all like dirt roads and stuff. But we get back to San Ignacio. And ultimately to where we're staying, Brass Base. Brass stands for Belize River Archaeological Settlement Survey. And Brass Base was a monastery of where the Benedictine monks hosted us. And so we lived in a wing of the monastery that's got its own, 4,006 stories. And that was my experience, right? I was back. That was, at that point, that's going to be Sunday afternoon. I'm back. And I'm going to get ready for work on Monday. There's 1 or 2 lingering questions, though, right? Way back in the beginning, I told you guys that I had seen the Witchdoctor was Witchdoctor number 2. They kept referring to him, oh, number 2, Witchdoctor number 2. And I didn't pay it much attention. I was just like, oh, I guess he's just number 2. I guess number 1 somewhere. Witchdoctor number 1 is much more powerful than Witchdoctor number 2. And I think this is true in a lot of like rural communities and this kind of thing, where there's like a main guy and like a secondary guy, right? There's an Emperor Palpatine and a henchman, like a Darth Vader or a Darth Maul. And I was just with the equivalent of Darth Maul. I learned weeks later that Witchdoctor number 1 was the Doan guy, was Teo's friend. So the whole time, the other guy was a Witchdoctor 2, and he was just keeping tabs on Witchdoctor number 2, just making sure everything was cool, just making sure. I would have never guessed, like, that was awesome. Like, that was super cool. And, everybody always wore normal clothes. And what I mean by that is if you meet or interact with real shamans or real people who do this kind of stuff, they don't wear like a bunch of jewelry and ostentatious, capes and crap, right? They wear normal clothes. You know why? Because they got nobody to impress. The Witchdoctor don't got to impress anyone. He's the Witchdoctor. So he's not dressed in ostentatious silliness, you know? None of them were. And I just really respect that about those guys. And it's been fun, you know, thinking about this, just thinking back. I hadn't thought about this, you guys, in a long time. And I mean, dude, look at where we've been, right? I had a supernatural journey with a shaman. There were like illicit drugs. There was a secret shaman with the known shaman. There was a breathing jungle. And there was even a little bit of Van Halen. I mean, do I deliver for you people or what? And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to the Pseudo Archaeology Podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you like and subscribe. And if you have questions for me, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, feel free to reach out using the links below or go to my YouTube channel, Kinkella Teaches Archaeology. See you guys next time.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Culturo Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.